short story by Paul McCann entitled Bobo's Christmas Gift. Behind the walls of the orphanage, Christmas was a lonely time for most of the children. And as the next resident of the orphanage, Bobo remembered what it was like to lie in bed and listen to the people passing by on the street. The Christmas decorations and lights shone through the windows of the dark dormitories where silence was master of all, who were locked up there within. Because Bobo understood what it was like to be locked up at Christmas time in an orphanage home, he decided to brighten it up a little for all those other little children. The first job he did was to ask permission to decorate the halls and rooms around the orphanage. A handful of people helped to raise some of the funds that would go towards making a better Christmas for the children in the home. There was a general knowledge quiz in which an entry fee was submitted for each team of 4. There was a huge response to this event, and after the questions had been picked, the teams went into battle. On stage, the Master of Ceremonies called out the questions, and round by round in a knockout competition, teams dropped out quickly. Bobo's team was up, and 4 people, Mo, Skeeter, Lefty and himself, and Skeeter was unbelievable answering the questions and took everyone by surprise. Skeeter, you're pretty good at these questions. Have you done these quiz games before? Bobo said. Well, it's easy like when you've already got the answers, replied Skeeter. What are you talking about? Bobo asked. Well, Charlie's watching over proceedings for us, Bobo, if you get the drift, said Skeeter, pointing to the ceiling above the stage, directly above the MC's head, where a small hole had been cut out in a panel almost directly above the question cards. Skeeter then pointed to a small set of earphones that he wore under his cap. I want to see you outside now, said Bobo. There's no time. The final set of questions is about now to start, Skeeter said. Give me the earphones now, Skeeter, said Bobo. Skeeter looked puzzled and said, Don't be like that, Bobo. Your team is just gonna win the quiz, and it will look good in the papers tomorrow. Now, come on. Bobo pulled the earphones from Skeeter's ears and crouched them under his feet. At the same time, the ceiling gave way under Charlie, who came down onto the stage with a huge thud. In the panic that followed, Charlie ran out the door like a scalded cat. At last, the 2 teams were asked to take centre stage for the final series of questions. It was close as the 2 teams went neck to neck, and finally it all came down to the decider. The first team that would answer a question wrong would be the loser. Charlie timed his entrance perfectly. Just when the other team had placed their hand up to answer the question, Charlie ran in and began dancing on top of the quiz table and singing a song that he had made up on the spot. Oh, here's a Galway, and I know the answers. Don't be telling me no, because I don't know what I'm doing. And everybody looked at him with distraction, and the opposing team answered wrong and allowed Bobo's team to win the competition. And as it turned out, most of the other teams had placed helpers in the audience, and some had even mirrors set up on stage. It was all good fun anyway, and for a good cause, so nobody really minded who won or lost. Bobo's team were declared champions, and as Bobo chased Charlie around the church hall, people had to see the funny side of it. I was only trying to help you, Bobo. Wait till I get my hands on you. I got a few questions of my own I want you to answer. Charlie looked worried and skipped over the tables and chairs with Bobo at his heels. And what a sight it was when plate after plate of donations came in from the local community. At the end of the evening, there was enough money there to purchase some Christmas decorations and lights for the orphanage. And the fun and games continued the next day when Bobo and some of the lads arrived to put up the decorations around the orphanage. The truck arrived with the goods, and everyone started to unload box after box into the conference room at the orphanage. When everything was unloaded, Bobo gave the first job to Mo. A large silver bell with gold tinsel. It was to be suspended from the centre rafter in the conference room. Mo never bothered to tell anyone he had a fear of heights, and as Skeeter stood with one hand holding the ladder, Mo's legs were shaking like a jelly. And the higher Mo climbed the ladder, the more it shook. Mo stepped halfway up the ladder and froze. Skeeter shouted up, It needs to go up higher, Mo. No, that's high enough, said Mo, who was as white as a ghost. Skeeter laughed and replied, Come on, just a little higher. Some of the other people started to laugh as Skeeter returned down the ladder, still holding the bell and shaking. He handed the Christmas bell to Skeeter and said, I need to go to the boys' room. Could you put up the bell for me? Sure, that's no problem. Maybe you could see Bobo about another job, eh? As Mo left the conference room, he was still a bit shaky on his feet. Trying not to fall in a heap, he looked back at Skeeter and he said, all right then, I'll just go and see what the others are doing, okay? Mo left the conference room and sat at the top of the stairs for a short time until he had regained his composure. And then he walked down the stairs to the ground floor and saw Lefty and Spider hanging decorations on the tree. Mo said, do you need some help, boys? Oh, sure, Mo. Tell Charlie we're ready for the fairy lights now, said Lefty. All right then. So Mo rushed off as fast as he could, but he forgot to ask where Charlie was. And after half an hour or so, Mo, looking round from room to room, he returned with a red face and he said, where is Charlie? Spider almost burst out laughing at first, but kept a straight face and said, Charlie's in the dining room at the end of the corridor. Mo skipped off down the end of the corridor and returned again and said, Which corridor and which floor is the dining room on? This one, Mo, Lefty said. The dining room is next to the chapel and the other end of this corridor, Mo, Spider said. What was it I had to ask him again? We need Christmas tree lights, Mo. Okay, lads, I'll be right back with the lights, okay? Just wait a mo. And off he went. He soon found the dining room and was amused at what he saw, because in the middle of the floor was Charlie's knee, deep, lying, with a serious set of fairy lights wrapped around him, entangled him into a ball of a Christmas confusion. He pulled this way and that way, making the puzzle even more complicated. Mo just coughed. Spider and Lefty need the lights now, Charlie. Bobo suddenly walked in and saw Charlie's predicament. He went over and said, in a kind but reassuring voice, Charlie, all you had to do was unpack the lights out of the box. Like, what's happened? I did unpack them, but I thought I was better. Maybe try them first. And then I discovered one of them wasn't working, so I tried to fix that one. And then as I went, I get spare bulbs from the box. I got myself in a tangle with all the wires. My ankles and feet were tied together in a horrible twist of wires. I didn't want to break any of the lights, and I began to get very careful. And I put the light bulbs back in their sockets, but that took ages, so I started to panic because the next thing I knew I couldn't move my legs. And I tried to roll around on the floor in an effort to unwind the lights from my legs. And before I knew it, Mo was standing at the door, telling me Lefty and Spider needed the lights. Bobo looked at Mo and winked. Oh, come on, Mo. Grab his legs, I'll grab his arms. Bobo, what are you going to do? Charlie said. Bobo replied, Well, Charlie, the only solution I can see is for Mo and I to carry you and the lights and the whole tangled mess together up to the Christmas tree and plug in the lights to the nearest socket. At least then, when we switch on the power, there'll be some pretty lights for all the kids to see in the morning. You're kidding, aren't you, Bobo? Said a very worried Charlie. He could end as an angel, maybe Bobo at the top of the tree, said Mo. Bobo smiled and said, Come on, Charlie, let's see if we can get all those lights untangled. Everybody started laughing. Eventually the lights were up in the tree and all the other decorations hung. Even though the orphanage looked bright and happy, there was something else missing. Bobo sat and thought for a while and had an idea. He proposed to put together a choir made up of all the orphans who wanted to sing. The administration of the orphanage agreed to the choir and Bobo started rehearsals. After dinner, each night, until Christmas Eve. Bobo picked up the minibus early on Christmas Eve and drove alone through the centre of the town. As people made their way in and out of the shops, it all looked very much the same as any other Christmas Eve. Buses and cars in the street were dressed up in their coloured lights. Santa Claus stood on every corner, ringing bells as passers-by threw an odd coin into his hat. Large banners were thrown across the streets with tinsel and trees in every window. The only difference this year was that a group of orphans were going to be part of the big scene in town. All the choir stood in a single line on the pavement as Bobo pulled the bus up to a halt beside the front gates of the orphanage. He sat behind the wheel of the minibus and watched each one of the choir as they boarded the bus. There was great sense and pride and confidence in every step as the boys and girls got onto the bus. The Good Orphans Christmas Choir, off they went on board, across the bridge, down towards the town clock, and the minibus continued making its way through the city, until eventually the choir arrived at the prison, and everyone sat staring as Bobo got off. He told everyone to get off the bus and asked Charlie to get them all into line at the gates of the prison. Skeeter and all the other lads were concerned at being beside the prison, singing Silent Night. Spider was very uncomfortable with the gates of the prison, as suddenly they swung open and the warden walked out and invited them all to come inside. Charlie looked at Bobo and asked, how long are we actually going to stay in here, Bobo? Maybe if I ask the warden nicely, I'll get you an extended visit, said Bobo. Charlie looked at the warden and said, excuse me, sir, I had to tell you, my mum's got my dinner on, so I can't really be staying too long. Smiling back, the warden said, could we have the pleasure of this performance from the choir for the entire prison? It would be a real treat for us all inside. Bobo replied, not a problem, just point us where we should go. The prison canteen was opened up for the performance. While the choir were singing, the warden had arranged with Bobo for a special gift for the choir. After the performance, the applause rung out from every corner of the prison, and then Santa Claus himself arrived right on cue with presents for the orphan kids. Every child received a Christmas present, with many more for the children who weren't in the choir and were still back at the orphanage. Before the children left the prison, they promised to make a return concert for the next Christmas. Something precious had happened that evening in the prison. The orphan children realized there were other people in the world who really understood loneliness and emptiness. They all had a familiar, similar feeling of hurt and rejection, and somehow on that common ground they received a spiritual healing. Even some of the hard crims inside were shedding tears. Many other inmates had promised to turn over a new leaf as soon as they were released. Sure indeed, it was a very special Christmas Eve. The children left the prison and get back on the bus. Before bringing the children back to the home, he thought he'd take them on a mystery tour. Down through the town and then on to the coast road. The bus motored along until eventually it stopped down by the beach. He brought all the children off the bus down upon the sand. Up above, the stars were shining bright, and one in particular shone brighter than most as the moonbeam shone down and danced upon the water. Lefty looked at Bobo and said, "What are we doing here?" Bobo replied, "Right then, who's going for a swim?" Suddenly, party music began to play, and coloured lights were switched on, and a loud group shouted, "Surprise! Happy Christmas!" The staff and other residents of the orphanage had planned the surprise Christmas party on the beach for weeks in advance. Charlie was so excited that he was doing somersaults all along the beach. Cartwheels and backflips were the order of the day as one after another he got into the swing of things. It was a very happy Christmas as the sun rose. And the next morning Bobo saw a new look upon the faces of all the children from the orphanage. The end.